This episode brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, which is a natural sleep and sound healing portal helping people globally to get to sleep faster and stay asleep longer through TAUMMHOMS.com. That's www.TAUMMHOMS.com.
It's My Right Stuff with your host, Grammy Award-winning record producer and inventor, Toby Wright. I'm your announcer, Grinnin' Barrett. Here's Toby.
Hey, and welcome back to My Right Stuff, which is a film, TV, sports, music, and adventure lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Lord Toby Wright, and on today's podcast, we have a very good friend of mine for many, many years, Mistress Carrie, formerly an on-air personality at WAAF in Boston. And if you're not familiar with that station, they were on the cutting edge of radio and breaking rock bands for almost 50 years. On today's show, we're going to try a little different format. We're going to attempt to interview each other at the same time. She's going to ask me some questions, and I'm going to ask her some questions, so it should be a lot of fun. Well, but first, I want to thank you, all of our supporters, who stream, download, watch, and support My Right Stuff. Keep spreading the word. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Be sure to click on our show notes below and follow our link tree for a full list of all the channels we're streaming on, as well as our sites and social media platforms. Also, if you're able, please follow our support link to donate to My Right Stuff. Every single dollar helps support My Right Stuff crew, who make all of this possible. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as the podcast channel of your choice, so you never miss a single episode. Please head on over to myrightstuff.com, go to the store tab, and pick up some snazzy merch for those bodies, too. Well, on today's podcast, my guest is Mistress Carrie. Formerly a DJ at WAAF in Boston for almost 30 years, please give a nice, warm My Right Stuff welcome to Mistress Carrie. What's with the playlist phenomenon? So you got your Spotify and all these things that are like, all right, now, we have our playlist, and that's how these new artists are breaking now. Right? They end up on somebody's playlist and so on and so forth. Now, if you roll back time a little bit, you'll know that, a radio station had a quote unquote playlist. And if you got on that playlist of a certain station, then, your career would most likely elevate, right?
Yeah. So getting the ad to the playlist on a station was a big deal. Right. Still is a big deal.
It still is. So how do you see rock radio? Where do you see it going today?
That's the biggest thing. Because I was only at AAF up until a very short time ago. AAF was this weird anomaly where we were still we were making programming decisions in-house. Boston is a really weird place where we're very tribal, we're very localized. You know someone's from Boston because they probably just told you. We're just that way. The way that some cities are. Chicago's like that. Baltimore's like that. New York is like that. Not all cities are like that.
Right.
And radio has this ability to be live and local, which is its biggest strength.
Okay.
Is to be immersed in the community. And so there would be things that we would play on AAF that other radio stations, either within our own company or other rock stations around the country, wouldn't have any success with. But for us, it was a huge hit.
Okay.
And so we would make all of those programming decisions locally about what songs and what artists we were going to play. And because I was the assistant program director and on the air, I was actually part of the programming team that helped to make those decisions.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like we're these gatekeepers, and we would sit in meetings and we would look at things like artist streams and social media presence. And, part of the job that I loved was I would go to shows and I would get there early to watch the opening act, and I would see, wait, this band is the opener, but 50 people showed up wearing their shirts. And
Right.
200 more bought their shirt after the show. And everybody knew the words to the song, but their songs aren't on the radio. Like, to try and find these groundswells and these diamonds in the rough, and to work with the record companies to get the bands in the studio and set up interviews and do contests and flyaway trips to go see them. And that was all part of my job too. And, you know, back in the old days of radio, when they were still queuing up albums in the studio, sometimes like there was no format. You could listen to like one of those AM stations and hear the widest array of music because it was like whatever
Sure.
Wolfman Jack felt like playing on the air that night or whatever.
Right.
And now that stations are so much more structured in their format, let's say, that it's like, all right, well, we're a rock station versus a top 40 station versus an alternative station versus whatever, that like, okay, this is what we do now. This is what we play. And for a while it got really fragmented.
Right.
I think rock, to a certain extent, those walls are starting to come back down when you see artists like a Machine Gun Kelly with some of this pop punk stuff that's blurring lines again, and people are trying to figure things out. For a while, like alternative music, they didn't play artists that had guitars in them.
Right.
And they became almost these pop stations again. And it was like, well, how can you be an alt rock station and not play the Black Keys? What? There's too much guitar in the Black.
Right.
And so we were always trying to figure out like what our audience expected from us.
Okay.
But then always trying to challenge them a little bit and bring them something that stretched the boundary a little bit. Whether it be a band like The Who, not Roger Daltrey Who, but The Who, the Mongolian dudes.
Okay.
It's HU.
Yes.
Like, they're Mongolian throat singers that are playing traditional Mongolian instruments, but they play them in heavy metal songs.
Sweet.
Or like Apocalyptica that's playing heavy metal on cellos,
Right.
or, you know, stuff like that. And it's like, you always want to kind of take chances. I mean, you know, we would play Lacuna Coil, but they were singing in Italian, or
Right, exactly.
playing bands like Nonpoint and Puya or POD, or singing in Spanish, or
Right.
it's like we would always try to take a flyer. Sometimes it wouldn't work. Sometimes it would. But you also can get to the point where you're too safe, which I think a lot of stations, these programming decisions are now getting made at the corporate level.
Right.
And it's a dictate to all of their stations.
Okay.
And so there's a little bit of like losing the fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing.
Right.
And depending on what happens, right now the big radio companies are all investing in podcasting in a major way.
Okay.
Depending on what happens, because these signals, the frequencies from the FCC are expensive and they're hard to get. And I wonder if we're going to get to the point where the big media companies start selling off these terrestrial signals and they start to be privately owned again. And if that happens, I think we're going to see a renaissance of the local radio station that's live in your town, that's immersed in the community again, because it's possible that these big companies are going to start selling off these little small market or medium market stations to independent companies because they're going to invest their money in technology, streaming.
Right.
I think that could be where radio goes, where if it does that, I think radio could have a full resurgence, because there's so many people have been saying rock is dead for fucking 30 years, and people have been saying that radio is a dead medium. And I am not of that opinion, because radio holds a place that streaming and podcasts and all these other things don't, which is it's immediate and it's ingrained in the community.
Exactly.
And it serves a purpose for that. It's just that I think maybe it needs to go through its own kind of revolution again, and it needs to change a little bit. But I just am such a huge believer, because for so long I was such a huge, proud part of the community. We're very tribal. Humans are tribal, and
Yeah, for sure.
AAF, like, you wore those call letters. It said something about you. You were part of something.
Right, exactly.
I think radio still has that ability.
I do too. And explained like that, I'm excited actually that, that's a possibility because,
It's possible. I mean, who knows?
yeah,
I think we're in unprecedented times right now, and I don't think when you and I started our careers, we could have foreseen what the internet was going to do to change. I mean, look, my first internship was at a recording studio, okay?
okay,
I thought, and you'll laugh at this because I grew up in the 80s, I wanted to be
okay.
I wanted to be the person behind the giant console in the Motley Crue video that knew what all the knobs did.
All right, okay.
And I thought it was going to be so glamorous.
Uh-huh.
And I thought it was just going to be a Motley Crue video all the time. And I did an internship. Yeah, I know you're laughing because you didn't realize I was an idiot. And I did an internship my freshman year of college at a recording studio around the corner from AAF, which is how I ended up getting my internship there.
Okay.
And I spent a summer recording a 27-piece mariachi band and setting up microphones for maracas.
There you go.
And that was most definitely not a Motley Crue video.
No.
And I was like, I don't think I care what those knobs do. This kind of sucks. Nothing against mariachi music, which I enjoy.
It's the
It
setting
was just
up of
not the Motley
microphones.
Crue. Yeah, it was just not the Motley Crue video I had in my head.
Right,
like it's
right.
not. It wasn't. And I cleaned the heads. That was my job as the intern, is that I would take the Q-tips with the denatured alcohol,
Yep.
and I would clean the heads and the grease pencil with the razor and all of that.
Oh yeah.
And that was something I was going to ask you, like, with the way technology is now,
Okay.
I am very fortunate that I learned all of the fundamentals the old way.
Right.
Do you feel that way too?
Oh, completely. And I'm really proud that I went through the whole analog thing when I did, and I was a maintenance engineer as well. So I got to learn how to fix all the gear, as well as operate all the gear. And so I'd never be in a tight spot with a client. And so, building studios and learning to fix the gear and align the tape machines and clean the heads and, all that stuff and edit, like that was a whole big thing. And then when Pro Tools came along, it was, like, what is this shit? And I was mad at it for a long time because it just wasn't my analog tape machine. It didn't sound the same. It's junk. And then, CDs came out and all this stuff happened. I was like, wow, okay, well, we're getting into this digital age. What should I do to make sure that I still have a career in music, because I love music so much. And so I was learn all the technical shit that I can. And, you can't see it, but I'm staring at like a big wall of gear in front of me right here. And that I still use to this day, to record and produce and mix bands. And it's, without it, I'm just me. But, it's funny how like that whole education, set me up for a better education in digital, because then I had to learn how to type because, when I was going to high school, I skipped typing class because what am I going to do with typing? We didn't have computers then. I didn't ever think I would be an assistant or a secretary. So, that was the only thing I saw typing.
Those were the only people that typed.
Right, exactly.
Secretaries back
right.
then.
So, like, I wasn't going to use that. I wasn't going to be a secretary. I was either going to be a race car driver, a race mechanic, or something else, and I didn't know what it was. But I knew there was something out there, but here I am. So to answer the question, I think it was, it was good that I got all into the technical side of music, because now, I have lots of computers and this and that, and, tons of Pro Tools programs and, all different kind of stuff that I can use to create, this podcast, a video edit, and, audio edit it, and all that kind of stuff. And it came in really handy, especially like, for instance, recording and editing Metallica's "And Justice for All." Like, there were literally a shit ton of edits. I don't know if anybody ever counted them, but it went when the tape goes by and it's rewinding and it goes brr, 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 brr. That's all the edits going by with the tape, right? And it's just because mostly it's silent when it rewinds, but all those edits, and then their songs are really long. So it got to be this whole, this whole learning dynamic of, where do you cut the tape? How do you cut the tape? Don't forget to, demagnetize the razor blades before you do it, or else you'll wipe out, maybe a second on each side of that cut. And that to me was like, oh no, what am I going to do? And so I would go and I would degauss like a whole box of razor blades, and half of them would be used for cocaine, the other half would be used for cutting tape, So, but hey, Dad, I never did that. All the artists did it. Yeah. Anyway,
It's the music business. You knew it was around.
Oh God, yes. So yeah, I mean, I feel very fortunate that I got my start when I did, and because of all the people that I learned from, just honed that craft right into the digital era. And I still to this day, I think the best sounding material is stuff that's like drums and bass are recorded on a tape machine and then transferred into a digital medium, and then everything else captured in that digital medium. Because when you run the tape back and forth over the heads, you lose the top end, right? Whether it's way, way, way top or whether it's like 5K, 6K, in that area, which is really integral to a guitar sound. For when the pick hits the string, it actually makes a percussive, right? So that sound is about 5 or 6K. If you don't have that, in your sound preserved properly, then you're going to lose that attack on the guitar, right? For instance. And so a digital recording will preserve that perfectly. An analog recording, yes, it will give it that thickness and fatness that you want, but at the same time, if it's run back and forth over the heads, 100, 200, whatever, how many times it takes to finish the song, you're going to lose all that attack that you worked for. And then when you go to mix it, you have to add tons of that attack back, which just adds noise because you're adding the upper frequencies, which is just noise. So
you've worked on some albums with some artists that doing what I do are defining moments. So can I ask you about some specific artists and some specific stuff, and can you give me some quick stories or memories of working on those? The first one you've
Sure.
already kind of touched on because you brought it up, is working on Injustice for All, which the Black Album celebrating its 30th anniversary recently. The Black Album is a moment in all music.
Exactly.
But Injustice for All and timing it with MTV with One, that was an important moment in music too.
Absolutely.
When you were working on that, did you know what was going on at the time?
Partially.
Or like have an idea of what could possibly come from what you were working on?
Well, we knew that One was going to be the very first video that Metallica ever did. So we knew that was going to happen. We didn't know that it would turn out like it did. James had it all in his head at the time. And he and I had, lengthy conversations about, what is this song about? And, so on and so forth. And he explained to me where it all came from and, where it was all going. And I had no idea, from that point forward, where that would go. You know what I mean? Because I was just, head down, get that drum take, get that good guitar solo, record that bass, do this, do that, and it was more of a task thing. And then, all of a sudden we were finished and it went to Steve Thompson and Michael Barbiero to be mixed. And that was the last I saw of it until it came out.
Then there was this line in the sand when grunge showed up. And you've worked, I mean, seriously, like there are just moments in rock and roll that just change everything. And,
Right.
The 30th anniversary of things like Nevermind and Pearl Jam 10 and Bad Motorfinger, like we're celebrating that 30-year mark right now where heavy metal in the 80s kind of smashed into this grunge of the 90s. And
Right.
that was that was my freshman year of college. So for me, it was incredibly influential. And I looked at bands like Alice in Chains as being this bridge between heavy metal and grunge because it was so fucking heavy.
Right. Exactly.
And you worked on Jar of Flies, the Unplugged record, the Dog record. Like, I never got to meet Lane Staley. I've talked to Jerry Cantrell. I've met the rest of the band, but I never got. What was it like in the studio working in a time where music was changing so much with one of the bands that was ushering in the change?
The only word that comes to mind is amazing. But at the time, that wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? I wasn't thinking about things like that. I wasn't thinking about, hey, I'm working with this cool band that's going to be this eventually. No, it was more like, my first two songs with Alice were a Little Bitter and What the Hell Have I for the Last Action Hero soundtrack. And I was, hired as the engineer, and, Nick Terzo was the A&R guy at Columbia Records at the time, where Alice was signed to. And I had heard Alice and I was like, I want that band. I want that, whatever it takes. I want that band. And so, I found out who repped them. I went after them. I had my managers go after them. I was like, come on, I just want to record some stuff with them. I know it'll be good. I know from the bottom of my heart it'll be good. Let's try this. So they hired me to do those two songs. It was difficult because the movie soundtrack guy at the time, God rest his soul, he's not with us anymore. But he and his engineer team were a bit of a pain in the butt. As the guy, I remember the engineer telling me, the sound, this snare drum used to hit you right here like this. I'm like, dude, if it hits me like right there, I'm going to have a headache and I'm just going to turn off the song. So let's have it be a little bit more gentle but still cracking, And he's like, well, I don't know what that means, but okay. He goes, you record it however you want. When we mix it, I'll fix it. Okay, whatever you want. So I got along great with the band. Long story short, we did that. They took it and mixed it. I think Andy Wallace mixed them. And then it came time to do, the next Jar Flies was next, right? And so they were on tour with Lollapalooza, and Jerry called me from Australia, which was the last stop. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Well, he said, like, do you want to go do an EP? Like, hell yeah, dude, with you guys? Hell yeah, let's go. I met them in Seattle, and 10 days, we booked a studio for 10 days. They came in, they had no songs, and Jerry just wanted to jam. And so for 10 days we jammed, and at the end of it, we came out with Jar Flies. And then
so that was written, recorded, and done all in 10 days.
Written, recorded, produced, arranged, and mixed in 10 days.
Wow.
Now, could that be done again? Like, I haven't been able to do it again. So the answer is maybe. Could, Alice do it again? Well, they haven't. So maybe they could, maybe they can't. But it was a special moment in our lives that is preserved forever. And we had the attitude in the room between Jerry and myself and the band was that if it comes out, it comes out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. There wasn't any, oh my God, we have to make this amazing because we have to be amazing. It wasn't any of that. It was more of, just let's rock and roll and see what happens. So that was the attitude that we attacked all of their stuff with me.
And then another line happened later in the 90s. And you work on this album called Follow the Leader.
Yes.
And Korn, that was 98, right?
Yes.
That's the year I started on the radio.
Boom.
As a DJ.
Okay.
I had been at AAF for 7 years before that, but started on the air that year. And just like with every other style of music, right, that the 80s was cool, then grunge happened. And I just talked to Dee Snider on my podcast about this. He was like, I woke up one day and I was told by the government, I got a registered letter that was like, you're not cool anymore and nobody wants to hear your music anymore. Like that it was a light switch. Same thing happened with the Bee Gees,
Right.
That the disco just one day, all of a sudden it was gone. And so people look back on, for a while the hair metal was a joke. And then people realize, okay, there's a lot of good music that came out of that era.
Sure.
Then every band that was a grunge band got signed, and there was a lot of grunge that wasn't great, but the good stuff remains.
Exactly.
The nu metal era, I think in a lot of ways people have made fun of to a certain point, but kind of understand, like, I love that music because when you're talking about Chino from the Deftones on the Seven Dust record, or Seven Dust, or Korn, or Limp Bizkit, or Tool in that era. Like, AAF was so ingrained with all of this music, and Follow the Leader was such a huge record at that time. You keep laughing when I bring it up. Why do you keep laughing? What are you laughing at?
Oh, just, that record was another one that was made with, well, if it happens, it happens. But, that was just our attitude in the studio. I like to keep it that way when we're in the studio because I've had too many artists, man, this is the best thing ever. It's going to be #1. It's going to win us Grammys. It's going to win us Emmys. It's going to win us all this shit. Guess what happened? Nothing. Yeah. So when people start getting a little bit, boisterous about things like that, I kind of just, all right, guys, let's keep that chatter out of the studio because we don't need it. We need to concentrate on what's going on here. And, I tell the story of Jar of Flies. I tell the story of Follow the Leader because those records were made under the guise of, hey, let's just have fun and make a kick-ass record and something that we'll all be proud of, and that'll be the end of that. And so that's what we do. And I'm sorry I keep laughing, but it's like, the Korn thing, I just remember 18 weeks of craziness and just having to try and hold it all together. And, I think it came out amazing. And I did some great sound experiments, which are on the record, which are, they're not supposed to work musically, but I made them work somehow, some way. We all I had the patience of the guitar players, which was amazing. And, we just, like, for instance, on Got the Life, like the intro is a guitar, through a fan. Like literally I put a what do you call it? A little tiny cigarette amp speaker behind a regular, fan, right? And I mic'd it out here in 2 stereo microphones and,
because every kid has gone up behind a fan and been like, and the fan's going, da, 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 da.
Exactly. And so I put it on really slow as it would go. And I just had him play the intro. And that is what you hear on there. And it's like, who would have done that? They would have just got a plug in and, I'm going to go to the Leslie setting or the whatever. And boom. I just like to create it because that's what I was taught back in the day. You know what I mean? If your microphone is in the right place, you capture the right sound. That's where the people that I grew up with, that's how we recorded. They didn't want to use EQ. They didn't want to use a plugin. They didn't have a plugin to use. They didn't want to use outboard gear. They didn't want to use anything but their microphone to capture that sound, and that was the end of it. So purists, basically. And so I was, when I think about all those records and the defining moments and things, it's the purity that I kind of snuck into the modern era, which I kind of like.
I'm not somebody that likes to talk a lot of shit. I mean, listen, I like to talk a lot of shit, but I find, like, as people ask me all the time, well, who's the biggest asshole you ever met? And it's like, that's just, I would rather hear about the stories of who was coolest. And
yeah.
You've worked with everybody from Korn, Metallica, Alice in Chains, Ozzy, Kiss. You worked with one of my favorite bands of all time, Queensryche, which,
nice.
The sun rises and sets on Jeff Tate's voice as far as I'm concerned.
Amen.
You've worked with Corey Taylor. You've worked with Slayer. Can you give me an example or two of people that you were shocked by their raw talent and taken aback by moments of genius in the studio? Like who do you look at musically and just go, like, that floors me? Or is there somebody that, because you've been in those rooms with those, like, watching and taking part in these bands writing these records?
I have, and in some cases I was an integral part of getting their creativity to come out. I'll start with Lars Ulrich, right? Floored, by the way, he recorded his drums back then. I don't know if he still records them that way, but he was taught that the harder you hit the drum, the better it sounds. So we know that to be false, but at the same time, that's what he was taught. So, if you look at a song like and Justice for All, which is 9 minutes long. It's really, really hard. He's got great upper body strength, no doubt about it. But, to stay perfectly on point the whole time, it was an impossibility. So we would record as far as we could, fall off the click or whatever, and we'd have to edit, right? But that whole process was something that I was floored by, right? And his willingness to just keep doing this. I'm getting this, and this is it. And then you see him, live, and it's like, okay, you're rocking the shit out of that song. That's awesome. So, just the creativity and how he, saw the song coming together, that floored me. Next, I guess, would be Jerry Cantrell. Amazing songwriter, amazing orchestrator. Lane would be in the same category, just floored by the things that would come out of his mouth, both speaking and musically, right? Just sitting there with Jar of Flies. Okay, here's what we would do is, the boys would create a track on the studio floor, send it upstairs to Lane via cassette or whatever means we had. And he would, he'd have an instrumental, and then he'd write the lyric and or melody. And so then he'd come downstairs with like a verse and a chorus and go, what do you guys think of this? And if it was cool, we'd say, keep on going. If it wasn't, we'd go, bleh, and go back upstairs and try again. Well, they were all cool. We never said no because they just were all like amazing. So, and Jerry's the same way with his guitar playing. A lot of that stuff that I recorded, I did his solo record, The Boggy Depot, as well. And he's an amazing musician, just the things that he hears in his head. Man, you mentioned Jeff Tate, amazing singer. I loved working with that band. Chris DeGarmo and I are still good friends. It's just, you run across these guys who, I've been in a lot of those situations where my jaw just goes, what? Huh? Morgan Rose playing drums at Longview Farm freaked me out. I couldn't watch him, because he does all of his theatrics.
Listening to Morgan play drums is only half the story.
Right.
Because when you watch Morgan play drums, his body moves in a way, if you've never seen Seven Dust live, where your brain says, oh, he's going to miss it.
Right.
He's going to miss a drum beat because his body's doing something completely out of whack. And then at the very last second, he hits exactly what he was supposed to, but he's looking over there.
Exactly.
And you're like, and he's screaming with his I always call it his Janet Jackson microphone, which he hates, but but it doesn't make any sense when you watch him play. It's so captivating, but it's almost like you're watching a train wreck because it's like, it doesn't make any sense in your head until you see it. And then you're just like, oh, then it makes all the sense.
Exactly. And that's what freaked me out was all of his movements, but it's all in his brain. They're all choreographed, right? And that's what he's doing, a dance. He's not playing the drums. He's dancing with the drums. And to me, that I had never seen anything like that before, except on stage, right? It's like, oh, cool. He's putting on a little show with, ooh, flip the stick and ooh, twirl around. And then I asked him to play with, can you not do that? And he tried, and he couldn't play. I was like, damn, dude. Okay, well, you go back to what you do. I'll go back to the control room, and I won't look. I'll just listen. And he goes, good.
I'm trying to imagine watching Morgan play drums normal.
He tried. It didn't work out too well. But those are 3 or 4 of the people that I can think of right away. There's many, many more. There's Michael McDonald. There's the list goes on that, people that have walked in the studio, either as I was an assistant engineer or an engineer or a producer that, I've had the luck. I don't know if it's luck, but I've been in the right place at the right time a bunch of times and, gotten to work with some of the best of the best. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And I'll keep doing that because I love making music.
I love being around it, and I have such a huge appreciation for it. I just don't have the brain for it. Like a lot of the artists I ask, and I'll ask you the same thing, because they say that music is the same part of the brain as language and math. Are you that way? Are you good at math? Can you speak other languages? Do you believe that?
I can't speak other languages. I've tried. Maybe I smoke too much weed, but I don't remember stuff like I used to. So the language thing is out, but I am good at math. I know how to do math really well. That's what, all the TAUMMHOMS is predicated on is frequencies. So I've had to, invent little formulas that would help me get to, the end of my problem with that kind of stuff. And so that was, that all came about because of math. And yeah, I mean, math and music are just one and the same as far as I'm concerned. If you can count to 4, you can probably play some music. So I know you can count to 4.
I suck at both.
Yeah.
I can count to 4, but
maybe not past
the clarinet
that.
and the marching band was as far as I went. The only person that's ever been impressed about my clarinet playing was Dean DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots when I talked to him. And I told him I was in the marching band, and he was like, clarinet, that's a reed instrument. And he started getting all nerdy. And I was like, dude, I suck. That's why I don't do it anymore. And it's a poor choice when you love heavy metal. There's no heavy metal clarinet.
No, not yet. You
can not yet, one. Unless you figure it out.
Well, you can put we can put some kind of pickup in it and blow it through a Marshall amp, and it might have this crazy sound, which might be pretty cool.
Well, if you ever have the inkling to try a heavy metal clarinet, you call me. I think I still have it in the attic somewhere.
Okay, I will, because I don't have mine. I know that. Well, I want to ask you one more question.
Yeah, go for it.
And that is, okay, so we were talking about radio earlier, right? And we were talking about, you were talking about genres of music and how certain stations play, they're allocated, the alt station, you're a rock station, you're a country station, et
yeah,
cetera,
they're formats.
Right, their format. Okay, so I guess my question goes back to, and it'll go back to before we were both born, like why, if you have an answer, I don't know, but why is radio so genre specific, and why do we now have like 600 different genres on Spotify or whatever your digital platform is of, alt with a bass, alt without a bass, all these stupid
New
things.
alt, classic alt.
Right. It's like, it's a stupid, like for me personally, it's stupid because there's 2 genres of music for me, good and bad. Other than that, it's not. It just doesn't, I don't care that if it's country or what makes it a country song. If somebody has a twang and they played a slide guitar. But I can think of lots of rock musicians who have a twang and play guitar that you would never call their shit country. Like, so I'm confused. So can you please help me sort all that out?
I can try to help you sort it out to the best of my ability, but it predates me. But here are some theories of mine. So
okay.
I think back in the day, there weren't that many artists and touring wasn't what it is.
Okay.
So I think back in the day, if a tour was going out and you could get on it, there was a lot more cross-pollination of what we would consider different genres of music now. But back then, they weren't all that different to people's heads.
Okay.
Then I think as touring grew, you had 2, 3, 4 bands that got put together as a package that started to become of the same ilk. So I think touring kind of helped develop formats and genres a little bit.
Okay.
I think some of it was done at the labels with marketing that, anytime you're going to try and market something and sell something, then you got to put a label on it and you got to kind of categorize it a little bit. Okay. I know for myself in the 80s, growing up, the music became part of who you were inside, but also who you were that you presented to other people as part of your identity. Like I remember in high school, there being a very big shift between the people that liked The Cure and Duran Duran, the people that liked U2 and In Excess,
right?
The people that liked Bon Jovi and Skid Row, and the people that liked Judas Priest and Iron Maiden.
Okay.
And I loved Bon Jovi and Skid Row, but I also loved the Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, and I could also appreciate the Duran Duran Cure But I had no love at that time in high school for the INXS U2 stuff.
Okay.
And that like defined, like, those were the people you hung out with. And I went to concerts with my friends, and you wore the jacket with the bands you liked on your vest. And
right.
So then I think you went to, okay, well, you've got 3 rock stations that you can choose from. So which one do you listen to? Well, I like the one that plays Judas Priest and Iron Maiden and Bon Jovi and Skid Row and whatever, but I don't like the one that plays U2.
Okay.
And I don't like the one that plays. And so I think the 80s outside of music was about becoming an individual and figuring out who you were. And it was also a very empowering time for women. So I think, and rock and roll in a lot of ways in the 80s was being driven by women, that it was either women trying to find their own voice or women had a specific role in heavy metal in the videos too. So I think it was this weird. And then I think when the 90s hit, the early 90s, grunge kind of had to find a place, and because it was different, so different from what was mainstream, that it had to be alternative to something.
Right. Okay.
And so then all of a sudden that U2 INXS station, like, I think those formats kind of grew out of touring and business and marketing and the labels, because look at what happened in the 80s. Like, every band in LA in the 80s that ever played a gig for Motley Crue got a record deal. Every band that ever opened up for Soundgarden in Seattle got a record deal. And so the labels would go, oh, well, they're a band just like this. So what is that? Well, that's grunge. And so that's a grunge band, and a grunge has a specific place. And I think the internet is having, for as fragmented and as myopically focused as formats are now, I feel like Spotify, and I think to a certain extent iTunes in the beginning, you know, you could always, like, you grab somebody's phone, right? But when the music was actually on their phone, and you'd find stuff that you'd be like, what is this doing in your phone? Why do you have this in there? Because people's musical tastes were a lot more varied than you gave them credit for.
Right, exactly.
But music became tribal, man, especially in, like, heavy metal. Like, those early Metallica fans.
Oh, yeah.
I had a boyfriend in high school, and, like, I liked, like, the Bon Jovi, like, the hair stuff a little more. They were all cute, and I was a girl, like, whatever.
Okay.
But the Metallica fans, that said something. You were part of something.
Right.
And you wanted to be around other people that appreciated it. You wanted to listen to a radio station that's where you were going to hear it, and you were going to go to a show and see other bands and be around other people. So I think we kind of did it to ourselves too.
I got you.
In a way. Like, I took pride in, like, wearing those fucking concert shirts to school. Like, it said something.
Oh, hell yeah.
With my giant hair.
That said a lot too.
Yo, it said something. But I think now, like, especially, you know, when you go back, like, I remember being in my freshman and sophomore year of high school. And that's early 90s, right? So that's when all of this shift was taking place. Okay. And I could always tell, based on what guys looked like, if they would say, oh, I like rock music too. And I'd say, oh, you like Van Halen, right? And they're like, yeah. But they were Sammy Hagar Van Halen fans.
Okay.
Because you could tell by looking at them that they were Sammy Hagar Van Halen fans.
All right.
As opposed to the David Lee Roth purists. Like, it's kind of snobby in a way, but I think back then, music, you didn't have everything else that we have now.
Right.
So music was a way that you expressed yourself and defined yourself and found your tribe of like-minded people. And so it's like, you know, go and look at the videos. Like, we all looked the same.
Yeah, no, I know.
We all dressed the same. And so I think they found a way to monetize that. And I think that's what kind of corrupted it too, is they were like, well, then we're going to start marketing to those people. And then we need a radio station that's going to generate the target demographic of those people. And then, and then it just, in every format, it just, you know, the outlaw country versus mainstream country versus country pop versus, you know.
I got
You could be a Johnny Cash fan and a Shania Twain fan, but at the time when Shania hit, a lot of the Johnny Cash fans were like, "That's not country, Shania."
Right, exactly, because Mutt Lange produced it, right?
Yeah.
And
Who produced all the big rock records? So it was like
tons of big rock records. But
yeah,
you know what his
good
big,
ones
you know
too.
what his biggest selling record is? His biggest record ever.
Hold on. Is it a rock record?
Oh yeah.
Hysteria?
No.
Oh.
No. It would be AC/DC, Back in Black.
Shit, you know what? I knew that because I literally was just talking about that on the air the other day. Because I was talking about bands like Van Halen, Alice in Chains, AC/DC that have been forced to have to reinvent themselves.
Right, exactly.
Stone Temple Pilots, and
Right.
it's harder than others. And AC/DC violated all of the rules when it came to Back in Black.
Absolutely. And
How do you change singers and come out bigger? Like Van Halen was big and they were different with Sammy, and AC/DC was big, but Back in Black is like a whole other thing.
oh yeah, it's crazy, right? But I think the music community accepted that because that record just rocks so hard.
Oh,
And it's so simple yet so perfect. I don't know. I just love that record. And Mutt was the perfect person to do it. He has
well,
a
that
minimalist
leads to
idea.
a question.
Go ahead.
That what?
He was more of a minimalist for that record for some reason, and I haven't been able to ask him why yet, but I will. Versus all the Def Leppard stuff, which is 5 million tracks of everything, and well put together.
Especially Hysteria.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
just so much.
Yeah.
I asked this question of the artists that I have on my podcast all the time, and I know your answer is going to be great.
Okay.
From a songwriter's perspective,
Uh-huh.
I don't care about the genre. I don't care about the artist. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
Can you give me an example or two of what you think is perfect songwriting and tell me why? Like break the song down. Like I don't care how poppy it is. But from a songwriter's perspective, why a song is so brilliant and break down why.
Wow. That's a hard one.
I know. That's why I love that question.
Yeah, that one gets silence for a second. That's an interesting question because there's so many good songs.
But it's not just because you like it, though. There's a difference. Like you could ask somebody, what's your favorite song?
Well, I'm going to go.
But of the craft of songwriting, it's a different question.
So right, exactly. So I'm gonna take my answer all the way back to the mid '60s with the Beatles. Okay, some of the best songwriting I think that has happened in our lives were from the Beatles. Some of the biggest selling singles in history were from the Beatles, right? So I think that those songs, a bunch of those songs, how organically they were crafted, were some of the best songwriting around. When they started getting into the later stuff toward the end of toward the end of the Beatles, it kind of got a little weird with not Sergeant Pepper's, but just they got into the whole psychedelic age, which kind of bred a different kind of songwriting. But I think technically, so I can go to Miles Davis, I can go off the deep end with some classical stuff over here, but I can also get to like a Metallica and why their songwriting is so brilliant and why it appeals to you. Because I've kind of studied this stuff because I had to, right? Like what is a song? What makes a great song? And it's something that is melody driven. It's something that's riff driven, for lack of a better word, and which is riff is just melody and instruments is all it is, right? And so. And it's melody driven, obviously, by a vocal. Now, if you don't have a vocal, then you usually have some kind of lead instrument. If we're talking classical, it's usually going to be a violin or something like that. That drives the whole song, drives the whole, as they call them, pieces, and those are considered songs as well, I think. Then there's the way that, say, Metallica writes, for instance. and they might have a verse that goes on and on and on, a short chorus, and then another verse that goes on and on and on, but they might have 4 different riffs in that verse, right? That change up time signature, that change here, that change there, that change for the sake of emotion, right? And that's where I think that Metallica, not necessarily the Black Record, because that's pretty much, to my ear, pretty standard songwriting. Standard meaning verse, chorus, etc., bridge, and then chorus out, and you're done. And so it's a commercial. That's a commercial way of writing, and that's fine. That's how pop music is done. But songs that come from other artists like Alice in Chains and Metallica, guys that they don't care about form. They don't care that it starts off with a chorus instead of an intro. They don't care. They just want what the emotion of the song is supposed to bring. And whatever they happen to be playing right then on the guitar, the piano, the whatever, that's what it needs to be. That's what's supposed to be there. And I think that it's really important to know that, once you get a vibe on a song and you have an idea of a lyric and a melody, that you got to keep going with that. Like, just keep it going, refine it, and keep it going. Don't lose what that feeling that you're writing about, because that is the essence of a good song, is the story and the emotion behind it. And you can technically put it together however you want. Make sure you don't lose that part.
So what's a song that you wish you wrote? Like, I'm going to put a gun to your head. Give me an example of a song that you're like, that right there. God, that's brilliant. That's it right there.
Okay, so I'm going to go with Money by Pink Floyd. Wish I wrote that one. That's brilliant, right? So brilliant. Like the cash register in the beginning and telling the whole story, and then the big girl voice at the end, and like, holy smoke. That whole record is like, Dark Side of the Moon is crazy. So that's one I wish I wrote. How about I'm going to go with Thriller from Michael Jackson. I wish I wrote that song. See, now we're talking about 2 way different styles of songwriting, right? But they're both...
Yeah, but still good songwriting is good songwriting, though.
That's right. And one thing I tell my clients all the time is that, they're asking me, do you like this song? Do you like that song? Do you like this song? It's not about the musicians. It's not about the bands. It's about the songs. Because in my opinion, good songs will always sell music, period. No matter who does them, no matter how old you are, no matter if you're from a different planet, it doesn't matter. If you come across with a great song that we can all sing along to, first of all, and dance to, second of all, then, or it evokes an emotion, like I just have to stop and cry because that song is so sad. That too is something that you're gonna like that song for, is that emotional pull, right? And so when you have all of those songs like that, you have a piece of gold. Don't lose it.
I knew your answer to that question would be good. I love that question because songwriters come at it from such different kind of perspectives.
Yeah.
And I love people's answers.
Right. That's a great question. I'm going to have to put that in my arsenal if you don't mind.
Don't you poach my question. That's mine, damn it.
And it's a good one.
Yes.
It's actually a really good one. Well, thank you.
Thank me for what?
Everything.
Everything and everything.
Thank you for being my friend. Travel down the road and back again. And now that's a good song too.
See?
It's a TV theme, but who cares?
Well, that's what I was going to say. That's the trick. You wrote a good song when it gets picked up with a sync license and continues to pay you, and you don't even have to get out of bed.
Exactly. That's a brilliant song.
That's how you know you're like, okay, that's a good one.
Oh yeah. I mean, sure. Like I said, I interviewed my friend Frankie Sullivan. "Eye of the Tiger" was obviously their biggest song ever. And that song, again, there's something that's not exactly formulaic, and but boom, there it was, all about.
Did they write that for the movie?
No, that was
okay.
It was written and then Sly liked it and they put it in the movie. They actually used a demo of it. And there's just so much, I learned there's so much, as Frank said, bullshit about that song that, that I got him to tell a bit of the truth. So, in his roundabout way, you'll learn all about it when you watch my podcast of Frankie Sullivan, episode 1. We'll cover that one. As I had to break it down into 2.
So what made you want to like start this thing?
So I've started the podcast, My Right Stuff, for, to put out my bands. Like, I'm having a hard time with getting bands out to be heard. Right. And so, I produce, I have 4 or 5 different bands. I have a label that I have that, we sign bands. It's Brian, the man you met earlier, and myself. And, we write music and then we kind of find, people to sing it or whatever, or I'll find a band, I'll produce them. And I wanted an avenue of marketing and a way to market the bands, a way to find out more about bands, to find out more about everybody out there and give everyone a platform to get up and speak your piece. Earlier on my podcast, I also do live performances, right? So, I'll interview them for half an hour and then we'll have a live performance of, 3 or 4 or 5 songs. That to me is pretty cool, right? And it's all in the...
Well, you can do that because it's their music and it's your label. Whereas for me, I can't just put music on my podcast.
Yeah.
Which people ask me why I can't, because it's copyrighted and...
Right. And so...
It's not the same as being on the radio.
Right, exactly, where radio pays for all that stuff.
Right.
And, you can do it if you get licenses, but, it takes forever, right? So, if you have 100 podcasts in the can, maybe you can start on 99 and get a license for that one. But, is it worth it? In the end, probably not. It's not going to get you that many
That's
more
why
listeners.
in the description of the podcast, I make a corresponding playlist. Because
Okay.
like this playlist, we talked about so much stuff that you'll be able to go to the playlist that's linked in the show notes of the episode of the podcast. And, because I figured if people are listening, they're going to hear us talk about an artist that they might not recognize or an album they might not know or a song we referenced.
Right.
And they know, hey, there's a playlist there with all of this stuff there. And I hope it turns people on. Speaking of generating a playlist in radio, it's kind of the same thing that
Right.
I want to still be able to kind of expose people to this music that they may not have heard of before. And these conversations on podcasts I learn something different every time about music and artists and songwriting, engineering, all of that stuff.
And it's great because, a lot of music fans, they think they know, and then they read a tabloid or whatever and, go internet searching and they find some weird thing. I mean, I've been asked some very, very strange questions, and like, where did you get that from? Oh, the internet. Okay, well,
Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia is another one. It's like, that's the truth, right? It's like, well, is it on the internet? It's like, yeah. It's like, I can edit my own Wikipedia. Oh, I can edit your Wikipedia, which is even the worst thing ever. So,
yeah,
it's what it is.
Yeah. But I think it's really cool for that. And what's awesome is that it exposes you to those same tribes, right? That
That's
you
right.
find a podcast you love and then you hear about another podcast and then you go there and you're like, oh, wait, you go through their episodes and like, oh, I really want to hear that one. That sounds really interesting. And then you get turned on to something else. And it all kind of feeds into this community of music lovers again, which is what I knew podcasting was huge when I was just on the air at AAF. I had a podcast there for a while, but I was very surprised at how welcomed I was into the podcast community coming from that radio background, and now doing both has been really interesting because they both have strengths and weaknesses.
Absolutely. They do. And, we can get global with this here podcast.
Yeah, I'm in 114 countries now.
Oh, congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I don't know who's listening to me in India and in Bangladesh.
But hello.
But hello, yeah, I think it's cool.
I think it's great.
You know, there's a lot of heavy metal and hard rock fans down in South America that they're listening to. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. South America has a lot of heavy metal fans down there going on for sure. In Europe, we haven't really covered Europe. Europe is one of the best places for music and entertainment in general. I don't know how much you've traveled in your life, but you've done a whole bunch of traveling. I know I've done a shit ton of traveling and world tours and all that nonsense. And what the thing that always gets me as Europeans is their love for entertainment, period. Right? They work hard and they play hard. So, and you can go to a festival in Europe and there can be, 50 to 100,000 people there, and they can put on gore. And then the next thing can be Mary Had a Little Lamb. And then the next thing, I mean, the lineup of artists is every genre that they want, period. And
which goes against the whole format thing you and I were talking about.
Right. But because that's only here in the U.S., right? I mean, I don't know. Like, they must have the same kind of guidelines in Europe for radio, but I don't know. But I would.
It's like the BBC's not the same. It's not the same kind of thing that it is here. And
yeah, I think it's.
I went and saw Judas Priest in Bucharest, Romania.
Nice.
And there were like 75-year-old dudes with like 5-year-olds on their back. It was like 4 generations of heavy metal fans in the family watching Judas Priest. It was unbelievable.
That's awesome.
Talk about tribal. Like, everyone in Bucharest had a Judas Priest t-shirt on, and everyone was going to the show that night.
Nice.
It was so cool.
Nice, yeah.
And Japan's like that too.
That's right. Japan is way like that. There's, many generations of families in Japan that you'll see at shows. And, I really like that, that I've had the influence that I've had in music. It just, it warms my heart because people come up to me a lot. I had 3 or 4 people at that podcast thing come up to me and tell me, thank you very much for making blank record because it changed my life. You know what I mean? And that, to me, I wasn't trying to change anybody's life. I'm, just trying to make music. And I know music heals and I know music helps. So, to just make the best music that I can with the best artists that I can at the time given, that's my goal, always,
Well, that's what was so hard about losing AAF was that it was part of people's life.
Right.
I mean, it was part of my life, obviously, for years, but like, when there was bad news to deliver, everything from the marathon bombing, like I was telling you, or 9/11, or the death of an artist that meant the world to all of us.
Right.
Or, amazing news, happy news, great news, about records or albums or whatever. I mean, the weight of responsibility of being the person that delivers that stuff, especially the bad stuff.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like the last example, right before we went off the air, Neil Peart died.
Right.
And Mike Shue, that I worked with for over 20 years, that's his favorite band.
Okay.
And there wasn't anybody more qualified to take over the radio station that afternoon and pay Neil Peart the proper tribute than him. And
right.
I mean, so many people still come up to me as we get ready to commemorate the 20th anniversary of 9/11. And like, the world was very different 20 years ago when it came to the immediacy of technology.
Absolutely.
Twitter and all that the internet wasn't what the internet is now 20 years ago. And people come up all the time and they're like, you are part of that memory for me.
Right. Right. Exactly.
And that, you don't like the reason why, but when someone tells you that you are part of something special in their life, the way that they were telling you about how those albums saved their life, changed their life, that's pretty special stuff.
It really is. Especially when, you're not trying to do that. You're just doing your job, right? And you're doing your job to the best of your ability every single day. You give it 152%, and boom. And in your case, you sit behind the microphone, you're a DJ, and, you got to tell it like it is, and so many, I'll never forget of me growing up, 6, 7, 8 years old, listening to WPLR in Long Island and New York. Like, this is the best thing ever. And I remember the DJs, and I even remember the tone of their voices. That's like really silly, but like the music that they would play. And, Mom, can I call in? And I want to make a request. Mom, come on. She'd be like, go outside and play.
I always used to think like, all right, the bright purple hair, like if anybody knows it's me, it's going to be because of that.
Right.
It's the tone of the voice.
Exactly.
I get recognized because people hear my voice more than anything. If I'm talking to the cashier at the supermarket, somebody will go, are you Mistress Carrie? And I'm like, did the hair give me away? And they're like, no. I know the voice.
Exactly. So how'd you get your name, by the way? I never did ask
you. The audience gave it to me. Okay. So I started on the air at AAF at night.
Okay. And
I was the only girl on the air. And it was kind of like a trial thing. Like I was a roadie before I was a DJ. You know, and so I was like driving trucks and rigging lights and running cables and whatever, and had been working on the promotions department at AAF and had applied for every job. And they took a flyer and said, let's put this girl on at night and see. She knows the band. She knows the crews. She knows what she's talking about.
Cool.
And after like a month or two, people started calling and they'd be like, I spend every night with you and my wife, and you're the other woman in my life. And it's like I have a mistress and my wife's okay with it. Okay. And it just kind of happened that way. Like it stuck. Then I started playing phone calls with people calling me Mistress Carrie. And then the radio station was like, then they made bumper stickers. And then
nice.
It just became this thing. And it was like, Carrie, Mistress Carrie. Oh yeah. Like it stuck.
Right. Okay.
And it wasn't anything that I had ever intended. It wasn't something I planned. I didn't name myself that. It didn't hurt that I had bright purple hair and wore black all the time and like fit this image people had in their head.
Sure.
But back when I started on the air, the internet was in its infancy. It's not like a lot of people knew what I looked like at the time until I went out in public and was introducing bands on stage.
Right.
They just went by me being this mysterious woman on the air at night, that because I was on the air at night, that was the show that took all the chances on the new bands too.
Absolutely.
So I would be playing stuff first and was going to the shows and became friends with the bands. And then it was like, well, if anybody's going to know what's going on about an album, a concert, well, Mistress Carrie would know. And then the band started like giving me shout outs from the stage. And at that point it was like, this name, whether you like it or not, is stuck.
Exactly.
You're not getting rid of it at that point.
Right.
And I mean, now it's like, I don't know. I mean, it's been 23 years. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm stuck with it now, but I'm fine with it. Like, I love it, you know?
Yeah, why not?
So people will go, do I call you Mistress? Or can I just call you Carrie? Or like, so some people call me Mistress. Some people call me Carrie. Some people call me MC, which I kind of love too.
Right.
So whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, it was a name that the audience gave me. And it's one of those things, I think, with anybody, that when your fans care enough to give you a nickname.
Right, exactly.
Then you run with it.
That's right. Because you got to love those fans, and those are the people that are paying attention, and those are the ones that, you kind of have to, you massage along, because, they love you and they want, they just want more interaction. And you've touched them.
Well, that
somehow.
And that late 90s, early 2000s era of rock, I mean, that was, especially for a woman, right? When it was really heavy, when that new metal stuff, and that I was a woman in rock that wasn't around because I was the girlfriend of the bands or whatever, that it was like I knew what I was talking about, and the bands respected me and befriended me and gave me that respect and showed that respect to me in front of the audience. That like if you go and watch the Woodstock 99 documentary about the sausage fest at Woodstock and how awful it was for women and all of that kind of stuff, like that era of time, I didn't feel like that because I felt like I guess I was looked at different. Like if somebody had like, show your tits, like the guy next to her would have been like, don't you fucking disrespect her like that, and like punch him in the head or something. Like it was just, it was like I was in this weird heavy metal like bubble or something.
Right.
You know? I mean, there were always the knuckleheads, but like I think that I earned this reputation for knowing what I was talking about, and
Exactly.
the bands kind of showed the fans like, no, just because she's a girl doesn't mean she doesn't know what she's talking about. Like she knows what she's talking about.
Exactly. And that's a fabulous place to come from too. You know, just,
yeah, for sure.
You know, because it empowers you, male or female. You know what I mean? And anybody put in that situation, and you feel like, oh, okay, and you're lifted up, and you know you're able to take what you have to the next level with confidence. You know what I mean?
Well, it comes up a lot now where, you know, back then it was like a radio station needed a female DJ.
Right.
But they only needed one. And if you were playing female-fronted rock, with my bunny ear quotes,
right,
you only needed one. And if you had a chick band on the air, we got a chick band on the air. Next, on to the next thing.
Right.
I don't think music is like that so much anymore. Rock stations have multiple women on the air now. There's bands that just happen to have female members of it, whether they're the singer or not. They're the drummers, the bass players, the guitar player. Like, it's less of this novelty thing now, where I think women have found a place in rock and roll that's taken them a long time to get there. And we're all standing on the shoulders of like Ann and Nancy Wilson and Joan Jett and Stevie Nicks, where there were just these women that were like, and Janis Joplin before. And like, there were just these women that just broke all the rules and showed that they could stand on their own and make music people wanted to listen to, not just because they were women.
Right, exactly. And that goes all the way back to the 40s too. You know.
Oh, sure.
With all the blues artists that came out, and you know, all that kind of stuff. And man, it just, I don't know. I grew up listening to all that kind of stuff because my mom was so very influential, you know, in the household of what we listened to. It was her way or the highway. So, you know, I got to listen to everything, which was great, you know, because my dad was into jazz too. So, you know, I got the whole jazz side of things, you know, with the jazz vocal thing. And then I got the rock thing, you know, definitely 24/7 with my mom, you know, so that was really good. And, you know, as I look past my camera right here, there's a big collection of albums sitting over there that, you know, I've had to collect over the years just because I love all that kind of music, you know?
Yeah, and albums are cool, man.
Oh yeah. I just fired up my turntable and my whole system the other day, and I was so proud of myself. It's fantastic. Why?
I got to get somebody to fix mine. Somebody's got to fix my turntable because it's old and needs some love.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I'm sure there's a shop.
I said something to somebody. I said, I think I need a new needle, and they were like, "You mean a stylus?" And I was like, "Oh fuck, okay, I don't even know the terms anymore."
It's a needle, damn it.
Yeah, I think I need a needle.
Right. But not the kind you're thinking of. I need a different one.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I think that it's really cool that the chick part of it, I mean, it makes you special, but not an anomaly anymore.
Right, I agree.
You know, that female fronted, like that it's not this special label, like what we're talking about, like, oh, well, it's a female-fronted rock band. Like, it was a whole other thing on Mars. Like, it's not even, it can't be a rock band. It's a female-fronted rock band. And now there's so much great music coming out from bands that have girls in them that it's almost stupid to point it out like it's a novelty anymore.
Exactly. Well, I'm going to point out a novelty. I have a band called Frame 42 from Lapeer, Michigan. You should check them out.
Okay.
And it's a dual female fronted band. Okay. So,
wow.
So this took some doing, right? And, you know, these girls were singing together, but they were treating each other like, hey, I'm the lead singer and you're my side chick. And when I got on scene, it was like, that's not working for me. It doesn't matter anymore. Like, in order to make this band special, you guys got to come up with a different way. Like, how about if we do 2 female lead singers? And you guys play off of each other, and whatever the song calls for, that's your part. So I went to pre-production. We wrote a bunch of songs. They wrote a bunch of songs. I came in and rearranged and so on and so forth, and got these girls to actually sing together and share the lead vocal duties, and which was quite hard because they both have egos. They both have great voices, but they realized by trading off that there's something special here. So go check out Frame 42. They're an amazing band. They're very young. The youngest member, I think, is 16, and the oldest is 20 or 19 now. I think she just turned 20. And yeah, they're something special. They really
well,
are.
there's plenty of examples in rock and roll with like dual. I mean, you look at something like Linkin Park, where it's like,
oh yeah,
Linkin Park wouldn't sound the same without either one.
Right, exactly.
And then you go to something like the harmonies of Alice in Chains, and it's like, if it were just Lane singing and Jerry wasn't there, it wouldn't sound the same.
Correct.
Like it's
the same with Heart. Right.
Yeah, Heart, or like the harmonies in Van Halen, or
right. All of that.
Journey. I mean, all of that great rock stuff. It's so layered in there that all right, I'm gonna go check these guys out, girls out, whatever.
Yeah, all of them. There's 6 of them. So 4 guys, they all play instruments, and 2 girls, they don't, and they just sing. Well, one of them plays the piano really well. So
wow,
go check them out.
See, that's one of the cool things about the Mistress Carrie podcast, is that you find out about music that you might not have known about.
That's right. And the one good thing about
cool.
My Right Stuff podcast is you meet people that you might not know about, like Mistress Carrie.
Aw, this was fun. I've never done the co-hosted simulcasted podcast thing.
I know, it's pretty cool, right? I think it's worked out well.
Interviewing. I feel like we've been playing tennis. It's weird. Asking each other questions. Lob to you, Toby.
Exactly.
Well, I'm so glad that we got a chance to get caught up in Nashville, and that we sat down and made time to do this, because
absolutely, thank you.
You bring such an interesting perspective of being that person in the studio that's like the conductor of the orchestra. And
right.
You've worked on so many artist projects that we know and love, that were so important to us, that you're not a member of the band, but you were there, and you bring interesting perspective on all of that.
And it was a lot of fun, and I want to keep on keeping on. So anybody listening,
you and me both.
Anybody listening who wants a record done, call me. Get in touch.
Oh, be careful about that.
Yeah, I know.
You're going to get some weird calls from the people that listen to my show. You're going to get some weird calls, bro.
Bring it. Oh, I got an email. You can filter it all out.
I'll put all of your links in the show notes of the podcast on my end, so people can find you.
Thank you, and I'll do the same for you as well. Yeah, and we'll go from there. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. We spent
Thank you.
almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Did you think it was going to be short? You know me.
No, I know me too.
Did you think you were going to shut me up?
Yeah, that'll be the day.
I talk for a living. Come on. It's what I do.
I know, and it's fabulous. Absolutely
it's
fabulous.
What I do.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time and everything.
Yeah, of course,
that
anytime.
You've done for rock and roll, especially.
I love it.
I know you do.
I wouldn't do it if I wouldn't keep doing it if I didn't love it.
You and me both. Let's keep on keeping
exactly.
on. And and I'm going to see you again, hopefully very soon. And now I'd like to thank our sponsor, TAUMMHOMS, which is a natural sleep and sound healing portal, helping people globally to get to sleep faster and stay asleep longer. And you can find this piece of gold at TAUMMHOMS.com. That's www.TAUMMHOMS.com. Well, most of all, a big thank you to all of you who stream, download, watch, and support My Right Stuff. And please keep spreading the word. I really, really appreciate it. Also, we now have a merch store that you can pick up some snazzy merch for those bodies. Go to mywrightstuff.com and click on the store tab. And don't forget to tag us in any photos with our merch so we can give you a live shout out in an episode. Well, I also want to thank our whole My Right Stuff crew for making this podcast possible every week. This has been another exciting episode of My Right Stuff. Be sure to tune in next week and every week for yet another adventurous and informative episode. Please remember to subscribe on YouTube so you never miss an episode, and I hear it will also give you 10 years good luck. Ring that bell. I'm your host, Lord Toby Wright, and remember to listen loud, play hard, and keep reaching for your dreams. Good night.
Thank you for watching My Right Stuff. This episode was brought to you by TAUMMHOMS, a natural sleep and sound healing portal available globally at www.taumms.com. That's www.taummmhoms.com.